This is My Randomology, and today we're going to crown the king or queen of the first science fiction story. Last time we talked about how difficult it is to actually pin down the definition for science fiction because there's so many things that kind of overlap but kind of don't, and at the same time there's things that kind of are outliers but we still consider science fiction, and we know what science fiction is but we have a really hard time actually defining it.
Now who can argue with that? Rabbit!
So here's the definition we're going for. Science fiction is speculative fiction that has some fantastical element, which is based on science or some fictionalized version of science. It should be presented as plausible in the real world, even if the things that it's based on are completely made up. That means that its basis should be scientific, not simply fantastical. Furthermore, this element or elements need to be central to the story's themes. The interaction with this thing should be essential to the story. So where does that leave us? What was the first science fiction story? Well, popular opinion, and it is popular, but I'm going to say that it's actually correct, is that modern science fiction as we know it was actually first invented about 200 years ago when a young lady named Mary Shelley wrote a story called Frankenstein.
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
The story of Frankenstein actively differentiates between fantasy, alchemy, and what we'd call pseudoscience and actual science. It's a clear distinction in the story that's actually important to the plot. So, fun story, Mary Shelley actually came up with the idea in 1816 while she and her husband Percy Shelley, John Polidori, and Lord Byron were all trapped in a manor in the middle of a storm. And to pass the time, they decided to spend the day writing ghost stories and then sharing them to try to scare each other at night.
Funny because it's true.
Now, Mary Shelley didn't actually write Frankenstein during these couple of days, but apparently one of the conversations that the group had involved the reanimation of dead tissue and things like that, and that kind of sparked the idea in Mary Shelley's head, and 2 years later, Frankenstein got published. I should also mention that Mary Shelley was 19 years old when she wrote this. 19 years old, and she essentially invented a new genre. What were you doing at 19? What was I doing at 19?
It's funny because it's sad.
Also, for anybody out there that thinks that science fiction is for boys and not for girls, it was invented by a woman, so... Now, to understand why Frankenstein is the first science fiction story and why it's so important in literature, we actually have to go into the plot a little bit. So, here it is, the story of Frankenstein in ish minutes. The story actually begins with Captain Robert Walton, who's a captain of a ship that's exploring the Arctic. Now, Walton is obsessed with making some kind of scientific discovery, finding a new route, expanding knowledge in some way that will, put his name on the map, so to speak. One day, the ship's crew actually happen upon a half-frozen Victor Frankenstein, who tells them that he's hunting a creature, and when he's brought on board, close to death, he proceeds to narrate the events that led them all there, and that's where the story actually kicks off. When Victor Frankenstein was younger, he was just enamored with the idea of the old alchemists, and he studied them, and he wanted to learn all their secrets and see if he could figure out what they couldn't.
And this will be my life now.
But this idea was quickly shot down by his dad, who pushed him to pursue the actual sciences, biology, chemistry. Victor also witnessed lightning strike a tree, and when he had a scientist explain to him, what electricity was and how it was understood at the time, Victor realized that, the real knowledge and power and all these different things rested in the sciences, not in alchemy, not in, all these other ideas that we had before that never actually went anywhere. And again, this is key. The story doesn't make anything to be supernatural. All of it is simply the proper application of science and energy, and poof. So Victor eventually develops a process where he can reanimate dead tissue, and he decides that the best way to go about testing out how far this can go is to build a hulking brute out of corpses and see if he can bring him back to life. And he does, and as soon as he realizes what he's done and he sees this creature in front of him that he's created, Victor becomes a total twat and runs away from the thing.
I immediately regret this decision.
Basically, Victor realized that he was now tampering in God's domain and thought, uh-oh, I done goofed. Hey, are you watching the short version of this video? Well, I know you are because you're watching this little clip right here. So, if you want to see the full video of this, go ahead and click that join button down there, become a Prime member, and you get access to the full video as well as videos nobody else gets, access to my YouTube journal where you see the process of putting these videos together, as well as putting my own work together. What is there to not like about that? Anyway, back to the video. So the creature, which is basically a newborn child, runs off into the woods, scared, terrified, doesn't know anything. It just basically woke up in, this gigantic body, and it's scared.
Father of mine, tell me where have you been?
And one of the things that the creature soon realizes is that it is absolutely and utterly alone. There is nothing else that he sees that is like him. He is one of a kind.
Day one of my life, where it all went wrong.
So this, of course, fills the creature with rage, and using Victor's discarded journal, tracks him down back to Geneva. Now, during this whole time, Victor's basically been suffering from a nervous breakdown, and he had to be, nursed back to health by a friend of his, Henry Clerval, who I kept mispronouncing as Henry Cavill for about 6 takes before this one. Victor gets word that his brother William has been murdered and that his nurse was actually the one that was found to be responsible, and that the nurse was actually executed for it. However, Victor realizes that the nurse was innocent and it was actually the creature. Now, Victor here has a choice to make. He can come clean about what he did, explain to somebody what happened, what the creature is, and what Victor's part in it was so that he can try to find this thing and stop it, or he can keep his mouth shut and preserve his pride. 3 guesses which one he does, and the first 2 don't count. So once again, Victor falls into a deep depression. This appears to be just a general thing that he does, and the creature finds him again, but the creature tells him that he will leave him alone if Victor builds a mate for him, because the creature does not want to be alone. The creature says that when the mate is alive, both of them will just head off somewhere else and just leave everybody alone. It'll just be just the 2 of them. So Victor spends the next couple of weeks traveling across Europe with Henry and gathering all the equipment and knowledge that he's going to need to build a second creature. However, as he's getting close to actually starting the thing, Victor realizes that what if the creature and the mate actually end up reproducing? What if they create a race of monsters? Super smart, super strong monsters. So the creature takes his vengeance again and ends up killing Henry. Now, Victor's actually arrested for that one since he's a prime suspect, but he's found innocent. The creature threatens Victor by telling him that he'll see him on his wedding night, so Victor ends up going home, marries the love of his life before something happens, and decides to spend his wedding night actually just looking for the creature. The creature, of course, was not referring to Victor. Actually, no, the creature did see Victor. Victor did not see the creature, and the creature ends up killing Elizabeth. Victor's father, having lost so many friends and family to this, also dies of a heart attack or depression. I'm not entirely sure. I don't remember exactly. But Victor, having lost pretty much all his family and friends, decides to spend the rest of his life hunting the creature down to make him pay. Of course, like most of Victor's plans, this seems to be extremely ill-advised, and having chased him to the Arctic, Victor finally succumbs to his injuries and dies.
Yes, very sad. Anyway.
Not long after, though, the creature actually boards the boat because, he knew that Victor was following him, and actually breaks down at seeing his father essentially dead.
And to make a long story short, too late.
The creature has something of a last-minute change of heart, and instead of, hating Victor for what he did, decides that the only proper thing to do is to destroy himself so that nobody will be able to follow in Victor's work and create another one like him. He resolves to walk out onto the ice and essentially burn himself. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Frankenstein. So what makes this so different from other works is the fact that it is based on science and scientific principles as they were understood at the time. Anything that is supernatural, anything that is mythological, all of these things are just swept away. They're not real. No, science is real. Mythology is not real. In fact, the title of the book, Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, alludes as to how science is the new power. Science is the thing that will give us the fire from the gods. The story isn't simply just about the monster rampaging or hunting Victor or any of that. Victor has legitimate moral choices that he has to make, and he drops them all. But
I know, right?
the story is very much about you know, how science advances and what humanity's role is in that advancement and how we should react to it. I mean, yes, the story is about how tall is he? Like 8 feet tall, I think? I don't remember. He's huge, actually. You know, it's not about this giant monster hunting down Victor. I mean, that's what the story's about. That's the story on the page. But the story is about more than that. It's about unchecked progress. It's about the advancement of science. The story is actually what's called a dark romance. Sometimes called a gothic novel. This is a genre that very much emphasized emotion and feelings over logic and objectivity. It didn't necessarily, you know, hate those things. It just placed more emphasis on the former. The novel very much asks the question, you know, are we moving far too fast? You know, is science moving further along than our morality and our stance on a lot of issues? Or, as Jeff Goldblum famously said in Jurassic Park,
But your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Now, there are plenty of stories that talk about, you know, the power that humanity can have and what we should do with it. Faust, for example. Faust makes a deal with a devil to gain power and then must face the consequences of those things. But this story posits that this isn't, you know, the devil or God or angels or fairies doing this. This is us. This is humanity who can do this. We are the ones that have the power. And that is very much a new thing. The creature isn't just some monster from our nightmares. He's not just, you know, some ancient creature of myth. He's the result of human folly. He's very much a metaphor. Again, it's not about a monster stalking Victor. It's about all the implications of that and what it symbolizes. That's what makes science fiction so powerful, I think. It's not necessarily about the fantastic things on the screen or on the page. It's about what those things represent. I mean, look at something like WandaVision, for example. I mean, on the screen, it's about a superpowered witch who lost her android boyfriend? They were married. And then took over a town and made them reenact sitcoms from the last 60 years. That's what's on the screen, but the story's really about loss and grief, the stages of grief. It's about the immigrant experience. It's about, you know, the pop culture and its place in moving along, becoming part of a group. Again, we've had metaphor and symbolism as long as people have been telling stories, but this is a metaphor and a story based on what could be possible, or what might, you know, the plausible made possible. That's what the definition said last week. Frankenstein changed the game. Frankenstein was the first science fiction story. And Mary Shelley actually wrote a little bit more science fiction after this. And that was all in the 19th century. That eventually led into the 20th century, and that's when you get Tom Corbett's Space Cadet, you get the Lensman series, you get Ursula Le Guin, you get Octavia Butler, you get Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, Battlestar Galactica, Star Trek, Star Wars. This is a huge thing now. And think, it all started with a bunch of people in a manor in the middle of a storm telling each other ghost stories. So, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. I will see you here for the next lesson.